Hi, everybody, and welcome to our second critique for Milestone 3. And our last critique is going to be on Thursday, this coming Thursday, which I think is the day after um, the next deadline. Let me just double check that. Yeah, okay, so yes, so Wednesday is our next deadline. So Thursday, I'll be doing our final critique, and then the class is going to close on Saturday, end of day. And that's it. So, okay, so I don't have, I guess, too much more to add to. I made some comments in the previous group critique about the process that we're going through. And at this stage, what we're doing is we're taking one of our designs and just turning it into two different possible color palettes just to experiment with the design. Um, and we're our classes go by so quickly, we don't have like a lot of time to experiment. But if you were doing something in the real world, you might do more color um, palettes for your client, for yourself. So you could see how you could really experiment with a lot of different colors and really, fine tune it. So we're just doing two, but it helps to give you a sense of how color can really um, change your um, the overall mood or feeling or story that your design tells. Um, let's see, what else did I want to say here? Oh yeah. The one thing I wanted to say is that something that you can always do when you create a color palette is to choose one color. Sometimes it can be hard to really get started with your colors. Like, how can I get started with a color palette? And so if you have a client or some project you're working on, you can decide upon what would be the one color that you're going to build your entire color palette from. Based on your understanding of maybe the symbolism of that color or the psychology of that color, like if you choose blue, what that might mean. And then you could, maybe just do a monochrome of that blue, or you could use that as a starting point for a color harmony that adds more hues. Just as a way of sort of figuring out how can I have a good starting point that meets the needs of my particular client. And for our class, we don't have a client. We don't have to meet, any particular requirement other than our own, feeling about what the colors should be. And then we're just dialing in the colors according to the color harmonies and principles we've learned in the class. Okay, I think that's it. So let's get started. Okay, Janae. All right, so you chose a monochrome and an analogous. I'm just going to zoom in here a little bit. Yeah, very nice. So this is like a green monochrome. It looks like you've really experimented with all of the different tints, tones, and shades. You've really, done a lot of experimentation, and looks like you've worked a little bit with contrast here in the center, light versus dark to give it a little bit of an extra focal point, which is a great idea. It's one of the principles we've learned in this class is how to create a focal point through color, and also how to make areas recede and advance, which is a really great thing to keep using in this class and ahead. And you've also, I think, done a really nice job here at creating that initial composition where you have worked with this sort of angles and star shapes and interspersed with some circles. So you've done a lot of repetition and kind of created this sort of central symmetrical design. And it's you can really see at this phase how having a lot of different areas to color in, whether through pattern or repetition or smaller, bigger shapes within shapes, doing a lot of overlapping, can create a design where you have a lot of options for adding your colors, which is really a great thing to have at this stage. Now, that's not necessarily something that you always have to do when you're working in design. You don't necessarily have to create so many different parts to color in, but it really is useful for this particular class just because we're exploring color. I just want to point that out. So this looks good. So this green has sort of a sense of being a little more quiet, because the green is a cooler, sort of calmer color, as all of the cool colors tend to be. And you have some muted areas. So it has a sense of being quite, um, yeah, a little more quiet, which is nice. And this one here has more energy to it, the analogous, especially because you've got that nice warm red color. And I like also the way you've worked with the analogous here. Analogous again is like, you know, typically 3 colors adjacent on the color wheel, and how you've worked again with a lot of different variations in value and saturation, and you've really spent some time here thinking about what you want to highlight with the red, more saturated colors like right in the center, and you kind of played with having a background of cooler colors and then a little bit more warm color, and ultimately you have most of the background in that kind of cooler muted color, so it really does a nice job of framing the more vivid colors, warmer colors in the center. So I think that's a success too. And just in terms of which one to pick to move forward, I think that's really up to you, which one you like the best. I think both of them are working really well, and it's really a personal preference. That's a lot of times, if you have a project that has a practical outcome, like you have a client who has a certain type of product that has a certain kind of feel to it that you want to express in color, then of course you would have to think about how you want how the colors will represent their product or circumstance or whatever they're working on. But in this particular class, you really can choose which one you think just works best for your particular project, and use that. So in your case, I think both of these work. So, and I don't actually have any feedback for how to, at this point, sometimes I will have some feedback for your design or for your colors, but I don't think I do have any. It looks really good the way it is. So you're welcome to just pick one and submit it for the next design, or if you want to experiment with it some more, you're welcome to do that as well. Okay, Ebony, that's very interesting. So your composition was better in hues of gray, white, and black, and your design became limited in colors. So I pulled up your design just so we could take a quick look at it. So it's this one here on the right is the one you went forward with. And let's see here. Here is this one. So yeah, I wonder, so the thing that I'm seeing here, let's go back here just one more, just take a quick look here. I'm seeing maybe that there's a little, possibly a sense of your design, because it has a lot of like vertical lines, which kind of create like a kind of almost like a bar effect, or like a fence, you could say. Behind it, you have this area in here, and then you also have behind here, you've got more of this sense of open space, sort of like opens it up. And I'm wondering if maybe a couple things aren't happening here. Is that I think it gets it's more constricted in the background now, and so what you may try doing, let's go back again, sorry to keep flipping back and forth, is maybe going with this area in your background, making it a very light tint of one of your hues to open that space up again. Like back here, so you could go with something really light. Maybe this could go a little darker, this could go way lighter. That might make you happier in terms of opening up that space. The other thing too is that, so gray tones in general have the sort of an appearance of coolness to them, even though they don't necessarily have to be cool. Like you can have, as we know, you can have a tone that is really based on any hue, but in general, especially the more you gray them out or desaturate them, the cooler that they look. So you may find that to get the effect you want, you may want to go with cool colors, like you've got cool in here, but you may want to choose cool colors for this one as well, and just different color harmonies. Like this could be based on a blue harmony, Do you know what I'm saying? Or green or purple, you know. But blue or purple are the ones that tend to be the have that kind of more of the achromatic look to them. And definitely a monochrome will give you more, maybe more of that achromatic look. So maybe you could try one of them as a monochrome, maybe. Just to say, I like the warm colors too, but I think that, you know, I think that could be something you could go for in here to get that effect of the spacious effect. And then again, sort of maybe kind of keeping one of these areas in here really very light. And also, did you have a gradient in one of these background areas? Maybe in here. Yeah, so this was a gradient in here that kind of faded away. You could maybe do that here in your background as well. Like take your solid color and kind of fade it into a lighter color, you know, down. So add that gradient in there. Those are just some suggestions. You know, you might find as I'm talking, you might see other ways to work with it. But that's what I would probably work with a little bit more to get what you want. So in this one too, so if you want to complement too, you may need to add a touch more yellow into this one. Right now I think it's leaning a little bit on the purple, which makes it look like a monochrome. So if you want a little bit more of the complement, you maybe want to like maybe take this side and move it towards a little bit more towards the yellow. Like in the color picker, just maybe even going up to here, you know, will bring in a little more of that yellow and that'll make it look more of a complement. You could do maybe the same with here. So you could have maybe two spots that kind of lean. In any color harmony, you never need to balance two colors in terms of the amount of space they take. I mean, what I mean by that is if you have a complement, you don't need 50% purple and 50% yellow. You can add in, just like we have looked at earlier, you know, you can have dominant colors like your purple, and then accent colors where you just have the tiniest bit of the other color. And as long as it's evident enough, you will start perceiving that as a complement, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's what I'd work on to get maybe a little bit more of what you're looking for in the design, is to experiment maybe with some harmonies and hues that would represent a little bit more of that achromatic look and sort of that sense of spaciousness that you saw in your previous thumbnail. Okay, I hope that helps. Let me know if you have any questions. But again, that's where I go from here. And yeah. Okay, Bianca, let's see here. You worked with complement and split complement, but you had some problems with Illustrator. Every time that you tried to do a stroke in your color swatch, a message saying can't finish previewing. That's really strange. I don't know what that would be about. I've never encountered that. Sometimes when I have problems in the software that seem unexpected, what I do is I just close everything up. You may have already done this and just restart my entire computer and see if that resets it. Sometimes resetting your preferences. If you just Google reset preferences in Illustrator, you'll probably come up with a good tutorial on how to do that. And yeah, so that's what I would probably do. But it sounds like you have a workaround, so that's good too. I often, sometimes if that solution doesn't work, a workaround is the way to go. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so here's your complement of green and a kind of a kind of a reddish violet. And yeah, you know, yeah, this I like this. This was a really nice composition, and it looks definitely like something like could be like a wallpaper pattern or some type of textile pattern. And yeah, you know, so you've dialed in the colors nicely in terms of your complement, and it is really interesting, isn't it? How a lot of times when we start making harmonies, we think, oh, we've got to work with really saturated colors that really, you know, seem to exemplify the harmony. But you can do all kinds of things. Like in your case, it looks like you've really worked with some very toned out, lighter colors and just a little bit more of that softer sort of look to your colors, gentler, sort of softer look. And yeah, I think that looks really good. You get a compliment, but it's not like a really, you know, assertive compliment. It just, as you can see, it's softer side. So I think that looks really good. And then this one right here, so you've got a split compliment of kind of like an orangey red and a yellow, green, and a blue. Yeah, that looks good too. I like the way you're sort of, playing with some transparency in your design, and you also have different um, saturations in here of your design, colors, like you've got nice changes here. That looks really good. And so let's see here. Let's just zoom out again. Yeah, I like these. I really like both of these as well. They're very different, and yet I think they're both successful in their own right. This is a little bit more, maybe more vibrant because it has more intense colors. Also, maybe just that third hue gives it a little bit more punch, in the split complement. So feel free to choose whichever one you like. And I also I don't actually have any suggestive feedback for your design. I think it's looking quite resolved. So, if you want to continue to experiment, maybe adding more circles or stripes or, experimenting with it, feel free. But I do think it looks pretty good at this stage. So, feel free to do what you want or not. Okay, Cassie. All right. Yeah, this was, I really like this particular thumbnail from the previous exercise, and I like the way you added just a few more shapes in here. I think that's very good to give yourself a little bit more room to experiment. And you have a split complement, and it looks like a triadic in here. Let's just hold on just a sec here. Okay, yeah, triad. So you've got a yellow green, a kind of orangey purple in here, and then some teal bluish color. Yeah, I think they both look good too. They have you've dialed those colors in nicely, and you have, good representation of the different colors in here. You've got different, variations on each of the hue, which is really good. So I don't know. I think these look good, and I think you should just pick which one you like the best in terms of the colors, and just keep experimenting if you like. I think this is also very resolved. I don't know if I see anything that jumps out at me that I think you need to work on. So at this point, I would, just maybe the only possible thing I may experiment with is potentially making maybe this dark line maybe just the tiniest bit thicker. It's a little hard to see the color in it. So I don't know. See how that looks. If it's, if even just like half a point or something like that, and see if that brings it into focus a little bit more. If it doesn't look that good for, if you look at it, you don't think it looks that good, then keep it the way it is. But if you do find that it maybe brings the color out a little bit more, that might be something you want to do. But otherwise, nice job. Okay, Soros. So you worked with Analogous and Triad, and you felt like your design was too simple, so you wanted to make some adjustments. That's great. That's really exactly what you should be doing as a designer at any phase of a project. In general, when we work on a design, we often are, we start with broad strokes, and then as we keep developing it, we might add color, we might make adjustments, but we're always really fine-tuning. So at any stage of a design, you can always really go back and continue to work on it and make changes. So that's exactly really what you wanted to do. So you've got an Analogous here, great, and a Triad. Yeah, that's nice too. Yes, good. So those are good choices of colors, and I think they work for your design. And I do really like these new elements you've added, the squares within the squares. I think that looks really good. And I might even add a little bit more, like keep adding more. I think that's, now when I look at some of these emptier squares, it almost feels like they also need to maybe be built up like that. So you could give that a try, experiment. Sometimes even just duplicating one of these, like you could even just sort of duplicate one of these guys and replace it. So sometimes that can be a nice way to create a little more unity in your design. So, experiment with that. The other thing too is I would experiment with moving some more of these shapes off the edge of the page just a little bit more. So in general, how it works is I think I shared that PDF I think it was last week in task 2. It's called Design Tips, and there's one page on there on cropping, and where you start pulling shapes off the edge of the page. And so my rule of thumb is if something appears really close, then like this, then you either want to move it further this way, away from the side so it looks deliberate, or move it across. Do you know what I mean? Like really pull it across so it seems deliberate, that it's wanting to go over the edge. And yeah, and in general, it's good to have things going over the edge of a design. Let me see. I'm going to pull that up again. Let's see if I can find that. So here's the example on cropping from the Design Tips PDF. I posted it in the previous thread, and you can see, so here's before, where you can see the shapes are going right to the edge, maybe a little bit before the edge, and then how this one, it's exactly the same design, and the only thing is it has been cropped. And you can see how the design becomes a lot more interesting. And what the eye does is the eye automatically fills in this part in here, so we actually don't really lose anything when we crop like this. We actually just gain in the sense of a more interesting composition. So you might give that a try a little bit more. Okay, Joe. All right, so let's see here. So you have an analogous and a split complement. Yeah, I really, it's interesting how they're have a little bit of similarity with the green, but otherwise they're very different colors. And this one is, just more on the cool side, and this is a little bit more, you could say, experimental. I always think of the split complement as a little bit more in the experimental side, which I think both of them suit your design. I could easily see going with each of these. So, you can definitely choose which one you think works best. What I would say for this design is what I might do a little bit more is, first of all, with the white in here, so instead of making it such an extreme white, I would go and pick one of your colors in here, and I would do this with same thing with both of your sides of your design, is I would pick, let's see here, I'll go down here and use one of these swatches. So go and pick like a really light tint, like something like that, so you can actually see the color of the green, and put that in there. You'll be surprised. It'll look so much better, and you could actually experiment with different tints in, here, sort of maybe mix it up so you sort of have variety in these backgrounds within your colors. So maybe this one would have a blue, this one would have a green background, or something like that. And then the same with this black in the background. Instead of going with black, pick a very dark shade. Something where, so see how dark that is? It's almost starting to resemble black, but you can still see a hint of that blue in there, and that will really start. What we're trying to do here is tie together all of these spaces through color, so that these right now look like sort of parts of the same design, and then these are starting to feel a little bit different, like a different part of the design. So do the same thing here. You've got such wonderful colors, you can really experiment. I really love the gradations you have in here too. I think they make the simplicity of the design become a lot more complex and interesting. Okay, so that's what I'd work on a little bit more. Okay, Chris, so just because we have a few more critiques in this week, I thought I would just pull in your previous task and include it in this group critique so we could talk about your thumbnails first. Interesting. So it looks to me like you're working with maybe like some kind of artwork for like a book cover, an album cover, or something like that. I really like the way you've been working with shape in here. You know, this is really interesting. These shapes in here and the diagonals, those look really awesome. Just one thing about the puzzle pieces. I think the puzzle pieces, I'm not sure if they're um, I would probably stick with simpler shapes in here. Like maybe do you need the puzzle pieces in here, or maybe you could experiment with some more lines in here. Um, or maybe you could just work with these shapes, which I think are awesome, and the circles, you know, like thinks these circles are really awesome. I think the puzzle pieces can look a bit cliched, you know, it's like a heart or a star, you know. It I think you could probably create your own unique shape or just use simple shapes. I think that would look, I think, really good in your design. Okay, so we'll go to the next. I think you've already chosen a design to work with, which, okay, good, you chose this one. This is actually the one I would have chosen too. I think this one is working pretty well so far, with the exception maybe of those puzzle pieces. And you've worked with here a split complement of red and two types of green. So it looks like maybe, so you've got the red in here, which is great, and it looks like maybe you have added in, so this is one of the greens right in here. Well, so hold on, let me just sort of see here. Oh yeah, no, it is actually just variations. Interesting. It almost looked like you had an additional hue in there, but it's actually just, you know, through experimenting with the different hues. Yeah. And then in this one, you have done a tetrad with 4 different hues. Okay. Yeah. So what I would say in your use of color is what you might want to do a little bit more is to maybe, first of all, decide upon where you want the design to have a focal point. It looks to me like you've got a lot of maybe petition, sort of competing areas for focal points. And how does that happen? In general, it's because you have like maybe some very warm saturated colors. Any type of saturated color like will definitely come forward. So you might just kind of again want to sort of think about where you want the viewer's attention to be and just pick one spot, like maybe somewhere in here, or you know, maybe a couple spots, and sort of maybe tone down the other colors a little bit more and experiment with that. And I would do the same thing with this one. And then again, I maybe just, and now that we're seeing the puzzle pieces in here, you can see how it tends to get a little bit busy. So I might sort of declutter a little bit and maybe experiment a little bit more with that, you know. So in terms of which harmony to choose, for your particular design, I think that maybe less is better, so I might go with the 3 hues of the split complement, so that it, you know, it harmonizes maybe a little bit more. And then, yeah, I might go with that, unless you really, really, really like the triad, in which case, or pardon me, tetrad, in which case I might just suggest, again, really focusing on where that focal point will be, and then maybe subduing a little bit of the design by muting it a little bit more. Okay, so yeah, keep experimenting a little bit more on both the composition and the color use. Okay, Gabrielle, so let's see here. So you've chosen to work with a pattern. Great. And yeah, so I think both of these to me look like they would work for this assignment in terms of lots of different shapes to play with and experiment with which is great. The one thing I would just say that in this design, it looks like you have some what we call pre-made shapes, like the yin-yang symbol and some of these decorative elements. And for this class, you do want to make sure that you're using, you know, any shape that you create yourself only, with the exception of the geometric shapes. So I'd probably lean towards this one because I think this to me looks a little more original in terms of the shape used. So yeah, you might want to go with this one and experiment with the color next. Yeah, all right, well, I look forward to seeing what you come up with.